Hello, I'm Andrew Gibson, and I've just published my new novel. It's called The Time Traveller's User Guide, and I'm going to read you the first chapter now. So here we go. Chapter 1. I don't like talking about my childhood. They say that happiness writes in white, and I guess that's why my childhood memories are so vivid and painfully alive. In a nutshell, I was pushed around from pillar to post through the UK care system after being found abandoned in a shopping mall. It was the Arndale Centre in Manchester, to be precise. At least my mother had left me somewhere warm where I would be found. There was always that to hang on to, I guess. She cared about me enough not to throw me in a dustbin. I had a few years with various foster parents where things never quite seemed to work out, but despite this I managed to do extremely well at school. It transpired that I had the IQ level of a genius, but I secretly doubted that IQ test actually measured intelligence. It seemed to me that all that they measured was my ability to do well in IQ tests. However, I always did have a compulsive need to understand how things work. Even as a child, I couldn't stop myself from taking toys apart, which often caused problems for me, especially if they weren't my toys. I was the proverbial boy who cut open his drum to see what made it bang. It was my great intelligence that allowed me to see through the cracks in the systems and spot commercial opportunities as they arose. I started dealing ecstasy tablets when I was 15, did very well from it until I was arrested and charged with possession with intent to supply. When I was convicted, I was sent to juvenile detention centre. Here I learned many things that an adolescent boy probably shouldn't have to face, but I discovered some inner fortitude within myself and came out a different, although I would hesitate to say better, person. I bootstrapped my way through adult education classes all the way to university and entered as a mature student reading physics at the University of Exeter and graduating with a 2-1. It was here that I met the woman who would eventually become my wife. In common with many of the women I had known intimately throughout my life, Helen found the fact that I was an orphan somehow both cute and sexy. In retrospect, I think it was our inability to have children that put our marriage under unbearable strain and caused it to break. Without going into any of the gory details, I now rent a bedsit-style studio apartment and lived a life of a functional alcoholic drug addict. That's a potted history of my life. My name is Charles, by the way, although everyone I know calls me Charlie, which in a roundabout way gets me to where my story starts. I was having a rather introspective evening with a bottle of vodka and some weed for company as I re-watched old Coen Brothers movies and played on my Xbox. It's not such a bad way to while away some time, so don't knock it unless you've tried it. It was getting pretty late and I was already more than hammered when this weird old dude seemingly appeared out of nowhere wearing a dirty grey hoodie. He made himself at home, helped himself to a drink and had a smoke while mumbling something about getting me a present. He said something about great power and great responsibility or something like that, which at the time sounded really cheesy and pompous. At one point, I'm sure he grabbed my head in his hands and forced me to look at him while he shouted something that I couldn't remember. The following morning, I woke up with a painful hangover, unsure if I had dreamt or otherwise hallucinated the whole encounter last night. However, a tatty gift bag was still sitting on the coffee table, and when I checked inside, there was a scuffed suede-style presentation case with a strange-looking watch inside. I often have a tendency to multitask badly, so it was while I was cooking some bachelor's cheese and broccoli pasta on the stove the following day that I decided to check out the watch. The pasta had just started to come to a rolling boil, so I turned it down to simmer gently while I checked out the present the weird old dude had left for me last night. I opened the case and had a proper look at it for the first time. The watch had a gently curving rectangular screen ergonomically designed to fit snugly against the wearer's wrist. The clasp appeared to be a simple square metal push button with rounded corners and an infinity symbol etched on it. This had two little rounded knobbly teeth on the back that fitted into a set of eyes moulded into the strap. The strap itself was unlike any material I had touched before. It was a sort of hybrid of leather and rubber and flesh that was warm to the touch, but not unpleasant or in any way clammy. It had a soft, somewhat inviting feel to it. When I put it on for the first time, I had a real surprise. First of all, the screen came to life and prompted me to scan my thumb against the infinity symbol on the clasp, which was now, apparently, a security measure. The symbol itself was glowing blue. After I completed this process to the satisfaction of the device, it took several attempts as the device scanned my thumbprint from multiple different angles, the strap gently tightened itself and without any sensation of pain, melded itself into my flesh. The device was now quite literally part of my wrist. It was impossible to find a precise point where my skin ended and the device began. After a moment of pissy panic, I gathered my wits and pressed my thumb against the infinity symbol, confirmed release on the front screen, and sighed in relief as the watch unblended itself from my wrist. I took it off and examined it in more detail with a growing sense of wonder and respect. I checked my wrist and found I was completely unharmed. I'd untried operating it without putting it on my wrist. However, since scanning my thumb, the device now refused to function unless I was wearing it, and it had fused to me. All it would do was graphically prompt me to put it on my wrist and scan my thumb. So I did. This time, I began to see what else the device could do. I don't know why, but I initially assumed it was some sort of super advanced fitness band, probably a testament to my profound lack of imagination. The first setting I came across was called Stop Clock. I thought this was just some sort of stopwatch function that had been poorly translated in the GUI. I pressed the button and what appeared to be a stopwatch started to count away milliseconds. However, something very odd happened at exactly the same time. Suddenly, my apartment became completely silent. While I was cooking, I'd been listening to a long playlist of 80s indie pop streaming from my Fire TV stick, and I wondered if the watch was somehow causing it to buffer, but the silence was deeper than that. There weren't even any ambient sounds in the background. I walked over to the kitchen and opened the fridge to see if the light came on when I opened the door, and it didn't. So that was it, I thought briefly, a power cut. But then why was the TV still on? But the image on the screen was frozen. It was when I looked at the pasta on the stove that I finally figured out what was going on. It was a jolting shock. The pasta was as frozen as the LCD TV screen was, thousands of frozen simmering bubbles in the cheesy sauce. It was then that I caught sight of a housefly frozen in flight at waist level in the living room. I walked up to it and crouched down and looked at it eye to eye. I pushed it gently and it moved through space, staying suspended in the air. I was able to push it all the way out of the open kitchen window. I began to speculate on what would be possible if I could move objects with mass and velocity. Could I alter the path of bullets? I walked out into the corridor and saw a frozen postman pushing a frozen letter through my neighbour's letterbox. I ripped down 4 flights of stairs and burst out into the courtyard, spinning around and around as I absorbed in amazement the frozen world around me. Birds frozen in flight. In the far distance, planes frozen as they laid down contrails. A dog with its leg cocked, a frozen stream of golden yellow urine struck with droplets of spray suspended in mid-air. A jogger frozen in time, middle-aged and red-faced. A teenage mother pushing a pushchair while talking on her mobile phone and blowing a pink bubble from the gum she was chewing. I stood in front of her and looked into her vacant eyes, waving a hand in front of her face. Frozen traffic on the streets, frozen delivery drones in the sky. I looked at my watch, pressed the stop clock button again, and the world sprang back into life as if nothing had happened. I hit the button again, and everything stopped. Stop, start, start, stop, stop, start. I had a universal pause button. My mind was suddenly drunk with the possibilities that this offered. I let the world carry on normal for a bit as I wandered in a daze back to my flat to think. It transpired that the stop clock functionality was only the tip of the iceberg as far as this amazing gizmo on my wrist was concerned. As I flipped through the top level menu options, I scrolled past stop clock, time jump, time skip, user health, sync, fuse, full sync, settings, about. So this was a time travel device. Call me a literalist if you will, but I'd always wondered how time travel worked. The trouble was you couldn't travel in time without also travelling in space. The Earth was spinning around the sun at an alarming speed of around 67,000 miles per hour. I wasn't an astronomer, but even with my casual layman's knowledge about our galaxy, mainly acquired by playing 3D space games on my PC, I knew that our solar system was rotating around a black hole situated in the core of our galaxy. So even travelling a day into the future or past would mean that I would also have to travel hundreds of thousands of miles to simply stay in the same place. The maths involved to accurately calculate the position of celestial bodies with the required resolution was mind-boggling. I seriously doubted that our present understanding of physics and astronomy would be sufficient to allow this, but then if the device was indeed capable of time travel, it could be from a distant future when science had advanced enough to make time travel possible. I had already seen what the device could do when it came to stopping time. What exactly was it stopping, I suddenly wondered. Did it only have an effective radius? Was it only affecting my immediate environment? Or was I stopping the entire universe? This lack of certainty about what was actually going on was one of the reasons that I needed to check what I was seeing. Maybe the device was interfacing with my nervous system in order to alter my perception of time, and time wasn't actually stopping at all. Now that would have the potential to be really embarrassing. Certainly the way it sank into my skin, blending with my flesh, did make me think it must be using some sort of biological organic interface. But then I wondered about how it was powered. Perhaps I was the battery. I needed to figure out what this device could actually do. I figured out a simple way to test if the device was just modifying my own subjective perception of time. I set up my mobile phone on a crappy tripod I had lying around and filmed myself as I paused time. I introduced myself with a little wave to the camera before I hit the pause button on my wrist. Then I slowly dragged a chair in front of the camera before walking to the bookcase and selecting 10 books, which I stacked neatly on the chair one by one. I then unpaused time and checked the video on my phone. It was with a sense of relief that it became apparent that time was genuinely paused when my watch said it was, and it wasn't some sort of perceptual illusion that the technology was playing on me. When I played the video back, it showed me waving, then a chair with a neat stack of books on, appearing out of nowhere in front of the camera. And so, as I grew in confidence that the device was actually doing what it purported to, I began to test what life was like within a frozen universe. I spent a few days on pause, wandering around looking for fun and getting into all sorts of mischief. While the world was stopped, I definitely wasn't. I still got hungry and needed to eat, sleep and go to the toilet. The fact I couldn't flush the water in the cistern while not physically frozen was as frozen as the rest of the world meant that I studiously avoided going in my own toilet and did wonder what several of my unfortunate neighbours would think of it when I decided to start time again. It was a real treat to discover what the time skip feature did. I got a real kick out of it as I felt that I was starting to become more inventive. If the stop clock option paused time, I assumed that the skip feature would skip time. Logically speaking, if the technology allowed it, it would be highly useful to fast forward or rewind time, and I wasn't disappointed. What I was able to establish was that the skip functionality resulted in me effectively disappearing from the physical world while I was fast forwarding or rewinding time. I was able to observe the world around me, but I wasn't physically part of it. I assumed that this system must have been designed to allow a time traveller to locate a specific place in time and to a lesser extent space. By using pause and skip together, it will be possible to ensure that you could arrive into the time stream without appearing in front of a moving train or inside a volcano or half inside someone else's body or in the middle of a brick wall. It would also allow me to time travel and arrive without being observed. I could simply pause time and move out of sight before allowing time to play again. Time skip was an amazing feature, and once I had mastered the fine level of granular control it gave me over time, I spent a lot of it working my way around local banks with a wheelbarrow. With a certain amount of careful forward time skipping and pausing, I was eventually able to fill this with money taken from the front desks, which I presumed was already in circulation and therefore pretty much untraceable. It never occurred to me that I was doing anything wrong. In fact, I felt as though this was the only possible course of action I had. It was as though I had a moral duty to rob banks now that I could do so with complete impunity. I think it was the sheer level of entertainment that I was able to find pausing time that stopped me from experimenting too much with the time-travelling features of the device. I began to speculate about the many different ways to use the device. It seemed to offer such a wide range of potential. However, I knew I would get around to time travel eventually, and apparently I did. I was sitting on the sofa, stuffing my face with a massive bag of real cheesy Wotsits, when another version of myself appeared directly in front of the TV I was half watching. The other me seemed to wink into existence, expanding from a single point. "Hello," he said cheerfully. I didn't know how to respond. Having never met myself before, I felt strangely self-conscious. "I'm from your future," he said. "Tomorrow evening you're going to try time travelling for the first time. You can call me Dave if you like, to avoid confusion." "Mushroom-flavoured dog's milk yogurt," I blurted out spontaneously as an idea struck me. "What are you talking about?" Dave said, looking deeply perplexed. "You're me from the future," I said. "I wanted to see if you could remember the first thing I said to you." "No, I don't think it works like that. Maybe it would if I travelled back to my own time, but then I suppose that would just be a normal memory of the first thing you said. I don't think there's any direct connection between me and you. Otherwise I should be able to remember everything I said to you before I said it, but I don't. I don't have any idea how our meeting is going to pan out. As far as I'm concerned, we've never met before." "Well, if you've come all the way from the future, you'd better have brought some winning lottery numbers with you," I said, laughing at my own humour. "You must be a mind reader," Dave said, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a scrappy post-it note and handing it to me. When I took it and looked at it, I recognised my own crabby handwriting on the yellow post-it note, on which I had apparently scrawled the following numbers: 11, 34, 28, 19, 15, 22, 0. "Thanks. So how much will this bring in?" I said with a growing sense of excitement. 3.4 million. "Nice." "So what do we do now?" Dave said. "I don't know. Fancy a game of FIFA on the Xbox?" And so it came to pass that I spent the first part of the evening playing FIFA against myself, getting very drunk and smoking too much cannabis. During the game we were very evenly matched, but due to the variations in the teams we still had fun, but the game did end in a draw. After a couple of hours, Dave asked if I fancied going into town. Normally, I would probably have stayed at home, as Saturday night in my hometown could be pretty dicey at times, but I felt a little more confident around myself. I reasoned that if my future self was still with me, then nothing bad could happen to me. His existence was like an insurance policy against anything lurking in the immediate future, or so I thought. Or was I his insurance policy? If something happened to me, then he would never have been able to travel back in time. Would he? We were clearly both finding the situation very confusing, and this was part of the appeal of going out. We needed a change of scene. We decided that if we ran into someone that we knew, I would introduce him as my twin brother Dave, visiting from Essex. So we began what became a monumental pub crawl. It was strange going out into town with yourself, but we got on really well. I found myself looking up to Dave as though he was my elder brother, though in reality he was only me from 24 hours in the future. Before going out, Dave decided that it would be better if we didn't wear completely matching clothes. Otherwise, to use the rather coarse vernacular that he employed, we would look like a prize pair of twats. As a result, he was now wearing a white collarless shirt and a jacket, while I opted for the slightly less formal t-shirt and jumper combination. As the night wore on, we talked for hours, drinking an impressive amount of lager. Dave then suggested that we might like to try a club. This was something that I would never do on my own. I just felt too old. But with Dave with me, anything seemed possible. So we headed over to a place we used to frequent in our younger days. It was when he suggested stopping time in order to try and get hold of some of the cocaine that was being consumed and used in the club toilets that it occurred to me that if Dave froze time, I would be frozen too. Equally, if I froze time, Dave would be frozen too. We decided on a compromise. Rather than freezing time, we both used the time skip feature of the watch to move time forward at 1/100th of normal speed. We were suddenly free to move without limits through the club, through the people in the club, through the walls in the club, while the world moved in slow motion around us. After we had both powdered our noses, we started talking again. Both of us were slightly more animated and excited. Dave was somewhat more drunk than I was, and this was having an immediate and visible impact on his behaviour. He was less inhibited than I was now, and was starting to stare lecherously at the scantily clad young women around us. Don't even think about it, I said. You're such a spoil-sport, aren't you? He said, laughing. The difference between me and Dave was the difference between a few extra drinks. He was behaving exactly like I would if I were just a tiny bit more inebriated, a little bit more tanked up. It was a strange situation for me, talking to myself as the voice of reason, but I didn't want to start using the power I had at my fingertips for lascivious purposes. But at the same time, I could see that Dave was at some sort of tipping point, so I told him in no uncertain terms that it was time we left, as I wanted to get a kebab. I think the moral of this part of the story should really be don't drink and time travel, especially if you're a novice user of a complex device from the distant future whose origins you are blissfully unaware of. It all started taking a dark turn when we left the club and found a kebab shop nearby. I'd never been able to resist a kebab after a club. Don't knock it if you haven't tried it. If you ask me, Dave was drawing too much attention to himself, waving his wallet around, which was stuffed to bulging point with large denomination notes that I had purloined from various banks around the town the day before. The day on pause, which had lasted 5 days. Until we left, I didn't really notice the two ne'er-do-wells wearing hoodies that were hunched in the corner, watching us with beady, hateful eyes. We went out of the door, happily clutching matching doner kebabs like a modern-day Tweedledum and Tweedledee. They must have followed us and taken a different route to get ahead in order to double back, ready to jump out and surprise us as we walked down a dark alley and turned a corner. It all happened so fast. One moment we were talking and laughing, the next we were confronted by the two men, one of whom was brandishing a knife. It was a white ceramic chef's knife, big enough to do some serious damage. "Give me your wallets, you cunts!" screamed the one with the knife. There was clearly something about his colourful vernacular that Dave found amusing as he started to laugh. On this occasion, laughing in the face of danger was clearly the wrong thing to do, as the knife man lunged forward like some sort of demented drunken fencer, plunging the blade into Dave's upper chest, right up to the hilt. Dave crumpled, twisting as he fell to the ground, snapping the ceramic blade from the hilt of the knife in the assailant's hand. It became apparent that the two muggers were novices at this particular trade, as they both seemed completely freaked out by what they had done. "You fucking twat! Why did you do that?" the smaller one screamed to the other as they turned tail and fled from the scene. I crouched down beside Dave, who was lying on his back. They say the quickest way to a man's heart is via his stomach. In reality, it transpires that a knife to the chest is much faster. Dave was looking very pale and was breathing fast and shallow. By the looks of things, the knife hadn't actually hit his heart, but it was close enough to it to have severed several major arteries. Dave was losing a lot of blood, both internally and externally, and slipped into a state of unconsciousness as I looked on helplessly. It took me a moment to remember that I had a time-travelling device on my wrist. The approach I took was to study the tableau in front of me in detail as I spun time forwards and backwards, walking around the scene, viewing it from different angles. The solution was simple. With time paused, I quickly tied Dave's assailant's shoelaces together. He was wearing a pair of knockoff Nike sneakers with yellow laces. This had the effect of causing him to trip as he stepped forward to lunge at Dave with the ceramic kitchen knife. I moved Dave to a safe distance, then checked back on the knife man as time ticked forward in slow motion. Naturally, his free arm came up to protect himself from impact with the ground as he fell. So with time paused, I moved out of the way, pulling it back down so it was by his side. I then tilted his other elbow and the knife towards him slightly. I didn't mean to kill him, but when I started time again, his forward momentum organised his limbs in such a way that he fell directly on the blade of the knife, neck first. It went in at the base of his neck, at an angle that resulted in the tip of the knife going all the way up into his brain. It was quite spectacular in its own macabre way. In this new reality, Dave jumped backwards, horrified by the spectacle in front of him. We were both too drunk to think entirely rationally, so behaving like scared teenagers, we ran away from the scene, leaving the bloody mess for someone else to deal with. Clearly, the knife man's friend wasn't sticking around to help. He turned tail and ran in the opposite direction from us. I woke up the following morning with the proverbial hangover from hell. I stumbled into the lounge and Dave was still there asleep on the sofa. How was this going to work, I wondered. I decided to have a walk down to the newsagents to try and clear my head and buy a lottery ticket and some things for breakfast. I found the stub with the numbers on that Dave had given me the night before and started planning what I would do with all that money. When I got back, Dave was up and about and was running the hoover around the flat. "Fancy some bacon and eggs?" I said, waving the carrier bag at him. "Yes, please," Dave said. "Did you get the lottery ticket?" "Yes," I said, checking that the ticket was still tucked safely away in my wallet. "So how long are you staying?" I said rather bluntly. "Well, I wasn't planning on going anywhere. Where exactly would I go? It's 11:30 a.m. There doesn't seem to be much point in jumping 7 hours into the future. I thought I'd hang around and see us win the jackpot." "But don't you have to go back to the future so that you can jump back to the past so that we can meet for the first time?" "No, I thought you could do that." "But how would that work? I already know what's going to happen." "Well, so do I. I guess it doesn't matter which one of us goes," Dave said thoughtfully. "Do we even need to?" I said, opening my wallet and waving the lottery ticket around. "I don't know, but unless one of us goes back, then how would you ever have gotten those lottery numbers?" This was confusing and it made my head spin. "Because you gave them to me." "Exactly what time did you travel back in time yesterday?" I said. "It was a few minutes after the lottery results were announced. I wrote the numbers down on a post-it note, put them in my pocket and stood in front of the TV and jumped back 24 hours. So I wondered, would the lottery ticket I had in my hand magically disappear unless I jumped back in time and went through all this again? Would Dave vanish as well? I didn't think so. The situation was different this time. When the lottery results were announced, both myself and Dave would be experiencing a buzz of euphoria from the win that would be quite different from Dave's experience of calmly watching the results and writing down the numbers. The act of Dave time travelling had changed the past and reshaped the future, but unless one of us travelled back in time with the winning numbers, our win would be in effect without a cause. Or would it? Perhaps the act of Dave time travelling had moved us both to a different universe in which we did win the lottery. Did that mean a universe where Dave didn't travel back in time still existed somewhere, where I carried on watching TV, stuffing my face with real cheesy Watsits, where we never met? It was all really confusing. We were both rather subdued that afternoon. Perhaps it was the remains of the hangover, or a sense of the impending temporal threat hanging over us as the crunch time paradox approached. Dave decided to pop out to get a bottle of champagne for us to drink when the lottery results came through, and I couldn't help wondering if this was tempting fate a bit. What if we were heading towards a paradox and Dave and the lottery win were going to disappear at 7:30 p.m. in a puff of logic? When Dave came back later in the afternoon, I didn't ask how he had managed to acquire a luxury presentation box containing a massive 6-litre 1996 Dom Perignon rose gold Methuselah, but I was glad that he was still around to drink it with me when the time came. We both watched the lottery numbers roll in with a growing sense of trepidation. I felt a jolt of excitement as the final ball fell, confirming my multi-millionaire status. But we waited until Dave looked at his watch and nodded before opening the champagne. Dave confirmed that we had passed the point of time, that he jumped. He hadn't disappeared, and neither had the lottery ticket I held in my clammy hand. It was later that evening, after we had downed a couple of litres of rose gold between us and pretty much exhausted the subject of what we would spend our winnings on, that I decided to jump back in time myself. I'm not sure why I did this. In retrospect, I think it was because David proved to me that time travel did work and was safe. Also, on some level, I felt uneasy about the events of the night before. It was while he was on the toilet that I picked up the post-it note with the numbers on, stood in front of the TV and set my watch to immediately jump me back to 7:30 p.m. the previous day. That's the end of the first chapter. If you've enjoyed it, please consider buying the book. Supporting independent authors is a wonderful thing to do, and you can find the links in the description. Thanks for listening.